This video is about Israel's defensive wars and the quest for peace. Subscribe for more. In the early morning light of June 5, 1967, the air was thick with tension over the Middle Eastern landscape. Below the sun-drenched hills of Israel, the echoes of military strategizing reverberated through the command centers. The newly established state, barely 2 decades old, was a melting pot of cultures and ideologies forged from the ashes of the Holocaust and the enduring legacy of European conflict. Among the swarming command staff was General Moshe Dayan, a figure both revered and feared. His eye patch was a symbol of resilience, a testament to the battles fought against overwhelming odds. Dayan strode purposefully toward the war room, where maps hung across the walls, each marked with the paths of advancing armies. Just days before, the shadows of war loomed as Egypt, Jordan, and Syria positioned their forces on Israel's borders, ready to strike. The atmosphere crackled with anxiety, but Dayan's presence projected calm. He knew the stakes were higher than mere territorial disputes. They danced precariously on the edge of annihilation. In a corner of the room, intelligence officer Ali Cohen pored over reports coming in from the field. Cohen, a master of disguise and espionage, had spent years infiltrating Syrian high society. His efforts bore fruit when he revealed key details about Syrian troop movements and artillery placements. The information had been pivotal in crafting Israel's preemptive strike strategy. Yet, Cohen's heart raced with the knowledge that, despite their preparations, they faced the looming specter, the possibility of annihilation, a repeat of the fate that had befallen so many of his people. As the sun climbed higher, the tensions boiled over. The Israeli government, influenced by both internal fears and diplomatic pressures from the United States, had decided that the time for diplomacy had passed. The call for action was clear. Standing with Dayan was Foreign Minister Ab Eban, who, despite his eloquence in advocating for peace, understood that a war was imminent. Eban had spent years trying to garner support from Western allies, particularly the USA, yet he grappled with the knowledge that any military conflict could fracture fragile alliances. Meanwhile, in the halls of power in Washington, President Lyndon B. Johnson faced his own dilemmas. His administration had been a staunch supporter of Israel, but he was also ensnared in the complexities of the Cold War. Must tread carefully, balancing international relations with the Soviet Union and the rising tide of Arab nationalism. Inside the Oval Office, the walls resonated with urgency as advisors debated the consequences of a Middle Eastern showdown, the specter of nuclear capability in the hands of adversaries looming over them all. The clock ticked ominously toward 7:45 a.m. The Israeli Air Force, due to launch a surprise offensive, stood ready to challenge the overwhelming numbers arrayed against them. As planes prepared to take off, fear and determination intertwined within the cockpit of the Mirage fighter piloted by Captain Nissim Shahar. A skilled aviator, Shahar had flown countless missions, but today was different. Today's mission could seal the fate of his nation. Back in Israel, the streets were eerily quiet. Families went about their morning routines, blissfully unaware of the impending storm. In one home, a mother tucked her son into bed, unaware that his future would be shaped by the decisions made in this fateful hour. Outside, the murmurs of neighbors gathered in clusters spoke of hope and dread, each person wrestling with their thoughts of what might come. The sound of roaring engines shattered the stillness. In a synchronized ballet of precision, Israel's Air Force surged into the sky, wings cutting through clouds as they soared towards their targets. The mission ahead was not merely a preemptive strike, it was a gamble for survival. Dayan, Cohen, and Eban had cast their chips into the unforgiving pot of war, where the stakes were nothing less than existence. As the first wave of planes approached Egyptian airfields, Captain Shahar's heart raced. He had trained for this moment, but nothing could prepare him for the reality of battle. Beneath him, the landscape morphed into a battlefield of conflict, a reflection of the historical grievances stemming from centuries of strife. In a flash, a sight of enemy jets ignited the air into a maelstrom of explosions, the sky painted with fire. Back in the command center, tension reached its zenith. Dayan watched the displays, each flash indicating the success or failure of the gambit. The initial strikes were decisive. Israeli pilots, fueled by sheer determination, took down enemy aircraft before they could take to the air. Surely, this would shift the momentum, but uncertainty lingered like a dark cloud. As victories piled up, whispers of retaliation from neighboring Arab states seeped through the airwaves. In the world beyond Israel's borders, the Arab League convened in Cairo, where leaders gathered to strategize their response. Among them was the young, ambitious Egyptian president, Gamal Abdel Nasser, whose fiery rhetoric echoed through the region. Nasser's call to action reverberated with promises of unity, yet the cracks of discord ran deep. He rallied the leaders, invoking the passions of their peoples, but doubts began to surface. Would their combined forces be enough to dismantle the fledgling state? Meanwhile, in the halls of the West German government, Chancellor Kurt-Georg Kiesinger observed the unfolding events with a mix of intrigue and concern. His own country, still grappling with the consequences of past wars, weighed the implications of supporting either side in a conflict that threatened to spiral out of control. The scars of World War II reminded Germany of the heavy toll of warfare, and the thoughts of intervention danced uneasily in the minds of its leaders. As the sun hung high in the sky, the air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke and the distant rumbling of cannon fire. Each passing hour intensified the urgency of the conflict. Israel had struck first, but the war was far from over. The enemy forces, though initially caught off guard, began to regroup, calling for reinforcements and rallying their resolve. The evening set in, casting long shadows over the battlefield. Dane sat in his war room, poring over intelligence reports, while Cohen worked feverishly to decrypt enemy communications. With each hour, their fate intertwined more deeply with that of the nations around them. As the clock ticked toward midnight, the question loomed larger than life: could Israel maintain its hold on existence, or would the weight of history bring them to their knees? Just as Cohen deciphered a crucial message revealing the counter-mobilization plans of the Arab states, a sudden explosion rocked the command center. Alarms blared, and chaos erupted. The conflict had escalated rapidly, and the tide had turned. The stakes were now higher than any had anticipated, and the echoes of the past clashed with the present. In the heat of the moment, Dane's voice cut through the chaos, commanding focus and action. Yet, as plans shifted and tensions mounted, the Allies were forced to decide: would they stand with Israel, or would history repeat itself, casting the nation into the abyss of despair? The question burned brightly in the minds of leaders across the globe, a testament to the complex legacy of war that had come to define the region. This was just the beginning, a prelude to a series of battles that would shape the course of history. As the night deepened, the fates of nations hung in the balance, entwined in a web of conflict and ideology. Little did they know, this war would not simply be a clash of arms, it would also be a quest for peace, a struggle to redefine relationships that had been damaged through the ages. And as dawn approached, the world braced itself for what was about to unfold. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo through the annals of time, with the shadows of the past looming large over every decision made. Would Israel emerge as a beacon of hope, or would the bitter lessons of history shape a different outcome? The echoes of war would put a whisper away, and with each passing moment, history waited to be written once more. As dawn broke over the battlefield, the horizon was tinged with crimson, a grim omen of the blood to be spilled. In the Israeli command center, the atmosphere was charged with urgency. General Dane gathered his top officers, their faces drawn and weary. He understood that the first wave of their surprise assault had given them a fleeting advantage, but the enemy was rallying quickly. The echoes of their initial victories were drowned out by the growing realization that this was just the beginning of a far more complex struggle. Today marks a turning point, Dane said, his voice steady. We must seize the momentum and push forward. Every hour we hold the initiative counts. He turned to Eli Cohen, who was still deciphering enemy communications. What have you got for us, Eli? Cohen looked up, the weight of their situation evident in his eyes. The Arab forces are mobilizing their reserves. They are receiving reinforcements from Jordan and Iraq. Nasser is determined. He believes he can turn the tide. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Dane nodded, his mind racing. The Israeli strategy hinged on maintaining the element of surprise, but they were running out of time. Cohen's intelligence would be crucial for their next move, and as he strategized, he couldn't shake the feeling that their enemies were emboldened. The echoes of their initial success had awakened a fierce resolve in the Arab states. Meanwhile, in Cairo, President Nasser convened with his generals, his fiery rhetoric igniting the room. We will not let this affront go unanswered. Our destiny is intertwined. We must unite and drive the enemy from our lands. His words resonated with the pride of a nation that felt slighted, and despite the dissension brewing among the Arab leaders, a semblance of unity began to form. In Washington, President Johnson faced mounting pressure from Congress and the public to intervene. Had historically supported Israel, but the Cold War complexities loomed large. Each move was watched closely by the Soviet Union, which had its own interests in the Arab states. Johnson convened an emergency meeting with his advisors, the stakes higher than ever. Gentlemen, we cannot afford to let our allies falter. The balance of power in the Middle East hangs by a thread. Back in Israel, the IDF pressed their advantage, launching a second wave of airstrikes aimed at Arab supply lines. Captain Nissim Shah, now a key figure in the air campaign, felt a surge of adrenaline as he piloted his Mirage over enemy territories. The skies above were now a chaotic ballet of missiles and flares, each pilot acutely aware that their actions had the potential to alter the course of history. The sound of missiles tearing through the sky reverberated in Shah's ears, but he was focused, calculating each move with precision. Suddenly, enemy anti-aircraft fire erupted around him, flares bursting like fireworks against the morning sky. He maneuvered his aircraft, dodging the incoming fire and responding with an aerial assault that left enemy installations ablaze below him. As the war raged, the ground forces began to mobilize. Israeli tanks rolled into the Sinai Peninsula, their metal bodies gleaming in the harsh sunlight. The infantry followed closely, each soldier aware they were part of something monumental. They were not just fighting for territory, they were fighting for their very existence, a nation forged out of the crucible of suffering and desire for homeland. Simultaneously, the international community was beginning to take notice. Images of the conflict flooded news outlets worldwide, stirring emotions from New York to Berlin. In West Germany, Chancellor Kiesinger watched with apprehension, grappling with his nation's history and the implications of taking a stance in this new conflict. The scars of the past were still fresh, and there were fears of repercussions should Germany express outright support for one side or the other. Should we intervene, it could cost us dearly, one advisor cautioned. The memories of World War II linger, and any misstep might ignite tensions we have sought to quell since the war. Kiesinger leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. He envisioned a Germany that had learned from its past, but the cries for action from the German populace resonated louder each day. The war in the Middle East had become a mirror reflecting the ideological battles that had once torn Europe apart. As the Israeli forces pushed deeper into enemy territory, they faced fierce resistance. The Arab forces, though initially caught off guard, began to regroup under Nasser's leadership. Reports reached Dayan of intense fighting near the city of El-Arish, where Israeli troops were meeting the full ferocity of Egyptian defenses. With their backs against the wall, the Arab armies rallied, their spirits bolstered by the unyielding call of their leaders. In the heart of the conflict, soldiers on both sides fought valiantly. An Israeli tank commander named David Cohen, no relation to Ali, found himself in a desperate combat scenario. His unit faced overwhelming odds, surrounded by enemy forces. "We cannot retreat," he shouted over the roar of cannon fire, his resolve unwavering. "For our families, for our future." The battles raged into the night, and as the sun set, the skies were lit by the flashing lights of artillery and the orange glows of fire. Throughout the chaos, the Israeli command center remained a hub of frantic activity. Cohen continued to decipher communications, piecing together a clear picture of enemy movements while the pressure mounted around them. As the Israeli forces advanced, they encountered a fierce Egyptian counterattack. Tanks rumbled across the sandy terrain like beasts, their metal clashing with the hopes and fears of those within. The battle for El-Arish determined the momentum for both sides. If the Israelis could hold the ground, they would secure a significant strategic advantage. If they faltered, the tide would turn against them. Dayan sat with his key officers, their faces illuminated by the dim light of maps and charts. "We need to reinforce our positions," he said urgently. "Our success in the air must translate to the ground. If we falter now, we risk everything." The hours dragged on, and the sounds of war echoed like a relentless drumbeat. Soldiers fought with a tenacity born of desperation, each man and woman aware of the weight of history pressing upon their shoulders. The scars of the Holocaust, the legacy of World War II, and the promises of a homeland intertwined within their resolve. As the night wore on, the battles of El-Arish melded into a chaotic symphony of fire and fury. The outcome remained uncertain, and as dawn approached once more, the world held its breath. Somewhere in the shadows of conflict, the path to peace whispered in the winds, elusive yet tantalizing. Back in Washington, Johnson made a fateful decision to send military aid to Israel. The ripple effects would reverberate throughout the Middle East, igniting a firestorm not only in the region, but also within the halls of power across Europe. The question lingered in the air: would the intervention solidify the bonds of alliance, or fracture them further? The dawn of June 6 promised to be pivotal. The sun would rise on a battlefield where destinies collided, and the quest for peace seemed as distant as the stars above. Little did they know, the struggles ahead would redefine relationships, and the scars from this conflict would leave an indelible mark on the tapestry of history. Would the lessons of the past offer a roadmap toward peace, or would they plunge deeper into despair? As the first light flickered over the horizon, the world braced for the next chapter in this unfolding saga. Dawn broke over the battlefield, casting a pale light on the scars of war etched across the Sinai Peninsula. The Israeli forces stood poised to engage in the next phase of their struggle for survival. Dayan, resolute in the command center, studied the new intelligence reports that flooded in. They were a mix of hope and foreboding. Despite their initial successes, the Arab forces were regrouping, and the stakes of each subsequent engagement grew heavier. Ali, Dayan called out, scanning the room filled with maps and the faces of his determined officers. "What is the latest from the front? Are we holding our positions?" Cohen, still poring over the decryptions, looked up, his brow furrowed. "The Egyptians are reinforcing their defenses around El Arish. They believe this is their moment to counterattack. If they succeed, it could spell doom for us." The tension in the room thickened. Dayan felt the weight of history on his shoulders. This wasn't merely a battle for territory, it was a fight for the very existence of Israel. The memories of 6 million lost during the Holocaust haunted him, whispering reminders of the fragility of their newfound state. He knew they must act decisively. "Prepare the forces for a counter-strike," Dayan ordered, his voice a steady anchor amid the storm of uncertainty. "We will not allow them to take back what we've fought for. This is our land. We will defend it with everything we have." Meanwhile, far away in Washington, President Johnson faced escalating pressure from both Congress and the American public. Reports of Israeli successes were met with mixed reactions. Many stood firmly behind their ally, while others feared the implications of deeper EU involvement. "President," one advisor said, "if we openly support Israel, we risk a larger conflict. The Arab states are unified in their anger. We cannot afford to be seen as the aggressor." Johnson leaned back in his chair, contemplating the precarious balance of power. The Arab states had oil, a strategic advantage that could tip the scales in a conflict that stretched far beyond the borders of Israel. He could almost hear the echoes of the past World War II, the Cold War, and the ongoing struggles for dominance. "We must show our support," Johnson replied firmly. "But we do so with caution. Aid, yes, but we will not overtly engage unless forced to." Back on the front lines, Captain Nissim Shahar, still recovering from the adrenaline of the previous day's air strikes, prepared for another mission. The disquiet of war gnawed at him, the faces of fallen comrades haunted his thoughts. Yet he steeled himself, reminding himself of the cause they fought for: their very homes, their families, and their future. As he climbed into the cockpit of his Mirage, the roar of engines filled the air, a symphony of conflict and determination. His squadron was tasked with disrupting enemy reinforcements heading toward El Arish. "Today we strike hard," Shahar called out to his fellow pilots, a fierce resolve igniting in their eyes. "For every family that waits for us back home, for every child who deserves to grow up in peace." The mirages took to the sky, piercing the morning haze. Below, the desert stretched like a vast ocean of sand, where history had been shaped through centuries of struggle. Shahar's heart raced as he flew, the weight of his mission settling over him, each moment a reminder of the fragility of life and the relentless pursuit of survival. As the squadron neared their target, they spotted the enemy convoy, an array of trucks laden with supplies and troops. Shahar's command rang clear. "Engage." He dove toward the convoy, unleashing a hailstorm of fire. The explosions erupted like violent fireworks, illuminating the morning sky. The chaos of battle consumed him, but in that moment he felt alive, fighting for everything he held dear. Back on the ground, Israeli infantry prepared for direct confrontation with Egyptian forces. The conflict had escalated into a brutal ground war, with tanks clashing like titans. David Cohen, the tank commander, led his unit into a fierce engagement near El Arish, the air thick with dust and the acrid scent of gunpowder. He barked, pushing his men forward. The roar of artillery drowned out their fears, the determination painted across their faces a testament to their steadfastness. Each man was aware of the stakes. They were not merely soldiers, but guardians of a dream. As the battle raged, Cohen's unit pressed onward, their resolve hardening with every passing moment. The enemy's numbers were formidable, but the Israeli spirit was unyielding. The fire of desperation ignited their courage. They fought as if their very lives depended on it because they did. In Cairo, Nasser watched the events unfold with a mix of rage and determination. The Egyptian president summoned his generals, his fervent voice echoing through the war room. "We will not be defeated. We must strike back with everything we have. Our honor and pride are at stake." The room erupted with cheers, but internally, doubts simmered. Could they overcome the Israeli forces that have proven so tenacious? As each side continued to exchange blows, the clock ticked, each hour morphing into a lifetime filled with fear and determination. The international community remained a silent observer, anxiously awaiting the outcome of the conflict. In Germany, Chancellor Kiesinger grappled with the ramifications of the war. The echoes of his nation's past weighed heavily on him. We must not forget the lessons of history, he repeatedly reminded his advisors. This conflict could reshape the alliances in Europe and beyond. We must tread carefully. Yet voices within urged him to take a stand, to support Israel, a nation born from suffering. As the days stretched into a tense stalemate, the Israeli forces maintained their positions, holding the line against the mounting pressure from the Arab coalition. Through the haze of conflict, whispers of peace began to emerge, a flicker of hope amid the chaos. Yet the concept of peace felt distant, overshadowed by the fury of battle. On the battlefield, both sides endured relentless fighting, each day claiming lives and altering destinies. The soldiers' resolve was tested. The cost of war tallied not just in numbers, but in the hearts of those left behind. Each fair battle served as a painful reminder of what was at stake. In the Israeli command center, Dane reviewed the intelligence once more, the clock ticking ominously. We cannot afford a stalemate. We need a decisive victory, or we risk being overwhelmed. He turned to Cohen, who had been a linchpin in their intelligence efforts. What is the latest on their movements? Cohen's eyes sparkled with urgency. We've intercepted messages indicating a major offensive is planned. Nasser believes that with support from Jordan, they can encircle us. If we don't act soon, we risk losing our advantage. Dane felt the burden of leadership weighing down upon him. He understood that the next few days would determine whether Israel would survive or succumb. The echoes of history reverberated through his mind. He thought of the lessons learned from the ashes of war and the hope for a future unmarred by conflict. We will strike first, he declared, his voice resolute. Prepare the forces for a full-scale offensive. We fight not just for our survival, but for the future of our people. That night, as the moon hung high and the stars blinked above, a sense of anticipation enveloped the front lines. Soldiers whispered stories of home, their dreams woven into the fabric of a nation still in its infancy. They were warriors, yes, but also fathers, sons, and brothers, longing for peace even as they prepared for battle. As dawn approached, the Israeli forces gathered, ready to launch their decisive offensive. The world held its breath, watching the unfolding drama in the desert, a stage set for confrontation with lives and destinies hanging precariously in the balance. But unknown to them, in the shadows of conflict, powerful forces were already at play. The international political chessboard was shifting, and the consequences of this war would ripple far beyond the borders of Israel and its neighbors. As the sun began to rise, illuminating the battlefield, the time for peace felt further away than it ever had before. And as the first shot echoed across the sands, the question lingered, would this be the moment that defined their future, or merely another tragic chapter in the long history of conflict? The world was watching. The stage was set. The fate of nations would hang in the balance as history prepared to ride its next lion. As the sun began to rise, illuminating the battlefield, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Israeli forces, fueled with determination, prepared for their full-scale offensive. Among them, David Cohen adjusted his helmet, his heart pounding as he thought of the lives at stake. The surrounding desert stretched out, offering both a harsh landscape and a sense of home, a land that cradled the hopes of a new beginning. Each soldier knew they were not just fighting for territory, they were defending their very existence, the legacy of their ancestors echoing in their minds. In the command center, General Dane stood at the forefront, surrounded by maps and strategists, the weight of leadership pressing heavily on him. This is our moment, he said, his voice a steady anchor against the tide of uncertainty. We strike hard and fast, seizing their momentum before they can mount a counterattack. Our intelligence shows they are overextended. Billy Cohen, having intercepted critical communications from the enemy, nodded. If we don't act now, we risk losing our foothold. The urgency in the room heightened. Dane issued orders to move the armored divisions forward, the roar of engines soon filling the air. As the tanks rumbled across the sand, the weight of their mission settled over the soldiers like a cloak. They were inspired by a shared purpose, fighting for their families, their homes, and the future they dared to dream. In the Egyptian command center, Nasser paced restlessly. Reports flooding in outlined the Israeli advance, and his generals echoed his concerns. We will not be caught off guard again, he proclaimed, rallying the troops in a fiery speech. We will hold our ground, defend our honor, and prove that we are unyielding. Across the Atlantic, President Johnson faced mounting pressure in Washington. The American public was captivated by the unfolding drama, and Congress clamored for action. We cannot let Israel stand alone, he declared in a meeting with his advisors. If we truly support our allies, now is the time to demonstrate it. The world watched as the sun bathed the battlefield in golden light, igniting the conflict that lay ahead. The first shots fired echoed like a war drum, signaling the commencement of the Israeli offensive. As the Israeli tanks advanced, each soldier steeled themselves for the clash, their hearts beating in rhythm with the roar of artillery. David Cohen's tank rolled forward, the grit of sand and the acrid scent of gunpowder swirling around them. He shouted, rallying his men, who responded with fervor as they charged toward the entrenched Egyptian positions. Captain Nissim Shah soared above in his mirage, the sky a canvas of blue and the ground a chaos of fire. From his cockpit, he surveyed the landscape, seeking targets that could provide the advantage they desperately needed. Engage the artillery positions, he ordered, his voice clipped with urgency. As missiles streaked downward, explosions erupted, sending plumes of dust and debris skyward. The ground troops pressed on, inching closer to El Arish, where the fiercest fighting awaited. The tension surged in the heat of battle, with every engagement a testament to the soldiers' indomitable spirit. They were aware of the stakes. Failure could mean the collapse of everything they fought for. In the heart of the conflict, the Israeli forces met fierce resistance. The Egyptian troops, bolstered by morale and a sense of urgency, pushed back with all their might. Artillery thundered as tanks clashed, a relentless cacophony of war that blurred the lines between victory and defeat. David's unit faced a harrowing assault, and as the enemy fire rained down, his resolve intensified. "We fight for our families," he shouted, urging his men forward. Back at the command center, Dayan meticulously watched the battle unfold on the screens before him. The reports streamed in, detailing the chaos of combat. "We need to reallocate resources. Our right flank is buckling under the pressure." Lee Cohen, focused on the enemy communications, interjected, "They're trying to encircle us. We must push through or risk being trapped." The hours wore on, the sun blazing overhead as the battle raged, and the landscape became a bleak testament to the horrors of war. Soldiers on both sides fought valiantly, their resolve tested to the limits. In the midst of the clamor, the realization of their humanity emerged. They were not merely combatants, but individuals with dreams, hopes, and families waiting for their return. As the fighting reached a fever pitch, a glimmer of hope flickered within the Israeli ranks. The IDF managed to push forward, breaking through enemy lines with a ferocity that caught the Egyptians off guard. "We can do this," David shouted, his heart racing as he rallied his men, their spirits ignited by the prospect of victory. They surged onward, pushing closer to El Arish, where the future of the conflict loomed large. In Cairo, Nasser watched the reports with growing frustration. The tide was shifting, and his forces were faltering. "Rally the troops. We cannot afford to retreat," he implored, his anger palpable. The echoes of determination surged within the Egyptian ranks, but doubts began to surface. Did they withstand the relentless Israeli advance? As the battle raged, the international community stood at the precipice, observing with bated breath. In West Germany, Chancellor Kiesinger faced mounting pressure to respond. "We must tread carefully," he reminded his advisors, haunted by the specter of his nation's past. The echoes of history weighed heavily on Europe, a reminder of the fragility of alliances and the consequences of war. As the Israeli forces continued to push forward, it became clear that this battle was not simply about military success. It echoed the unresolved conflicts of the past, shaping the future of the region. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the battlefield as the Israeli forces engaged in the final push toward El Arish. The air crackled with tension as soldiers fought fiercely, refusing to yield. David Cohen's heart surged with adrenaline as he led his men, their unity a powerful force against the chaos. Then, a breakthrough occurred. With a final push, the Israeli forces penetrated the defenses, and the cries of victory echoed across the battlefield. The Egyptian troops, overwhelmed and outmaneuvered, began to retreat. The tide had turned, and the impact rippled throughout the region. In the command center, Dayan felt the weight of relief wash over him. Yet amid the jubilation, he understood that the victory came at a profound cost. Lives had been lost on both sides, and the echoes of battle would linger in the hearts of those who survived. The quest for peace remained elusive, overshadowed by the shadows of war. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the soldiers began to regroup. The journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty. They had fought valiantly, but the scars of conflict would take generations to heal. In the aftermath, Lee Cohen stood beside Dayan, both men staring into the distance where the smoke still billowed. "What lies ahead?" Cohen asked, the weight of their actions settling heavily upon him. Dayan sighed, the flickers of hope casting a bittersweet light on the horizon. "We must pursue peace," he replied. "This victory is but one chapter in our history. The true battle lies ahead in building a future where our children can thrive without the shadow of war." In the hearts of the soldiers, a seed of hope began to grow. The conflict had revealed profound truths, uniting them in the quest for homeland and forging bonds that transcended the borders of war. As they took their first steps toward healing, the echoes of history whispered, urging them to carve a new path, one that held the promise of peace amid the scars of battle. And so, as night fell across the battlefields, a night heavy with memories and yet-to-be-written stories, the world braced itself for the challenges that lay ahead. The quest for peace would be arduous, but the resilience of a people who knew the depths of despair could also forge a future filled with hope, unity, and the promise of a brighter dawn.